You'll see a record button probably pop up on your screen. Good afternoon, I think, to the entire continental U.S. Good morning to Hawaii and Alaska, who's joining us from Pacific. My name is Robert Hannafin. I work with the Federal Transit Administration's Office of Regional Services and headquarters. I've been helping facilitate a number of these webinars, the 6 webinar series to help new FTA grant recipients be onboarded and learn more about what it takes to become an FTA recipient, a recipient of FTA funds. So this is our 3rd webinar in our 6-part series, Planning Processes and Requirements, Metropolitan, Statewide, Non-metropolitan Transportation Planning Programs. I know it's a mouthful. It's a really interesting topic, and we're going to be joined today by Rena Matthews and Eva Steinman. They're both from FTA's Office of Planning and headquarters. We also have staff on standby to answer any questions you may have from both the regions, as well as other subject matter experts. So this is going to be a similar flow to the 2 other webinars that we have done thus far. Again, this is being recorded, and I just wanted to mention this disclaimer. The presentation does not have the force and effect of the law. This is not meant to bind the public in any way. It's intended to provide clarity, and obviously grantees, subgrantees should always refer to FTA statutes and the relevant regulations, laws, and applicable requirements. So I want to mention that disclaimer up front. You all have probably heard it already. As for the agenda today, same structure. We're going to do an introduction just as a reminder. What is this webinar series? How do you interact or participate in the webinar and the Zoom function and mechanics of it? And then we'll get into the presentation. Like I said, Rena and Eva are going to split the presentation. It'll be followed by a Q&A session. And we do have a Q&A tool built into this webinar. It's right, it should be at the bottom of your screen, but it might be at the top. This little dialog box. You'll see this Q&A tool. You just click on it and you can submit questions. We are going to hold off on answering them until the very end, but we'll try to take note of when you ask that question, which slide, and we can always go back to it. Again, this is a new recipient onboarding webinar, so we realize a lot of this information is new. Really, what this webinar is intended to do is to provide kind of that initial introduction, right, of these topics. But stepping back real quick. The Federal Transit Administration, obviously, many of you are at this point already very well of who we are and what we do, what our mission is. We do public transportation, and we support communities by improving public transportation. And so we have grant making and oversight functions. You all will work very closely with folks at the region level. FTA is kind of divided into 10 different regions that oversee projects and grant recipients and those respective states. They're an amazing resource. You will have staff and points of contact at the region level who are going to honestly be doing a lot of similar types of onboarding trainings and walkthrough of just how to get grants and how to comply with these relevant requirements. So, when in doubt, always go to your regional contact. They're an amazing resource. And they are always on top of bringing in whatever subject matter expert they need to address your questions, whether that's someone from headquarters or from another region. FTA is an organization of about 700 people right now, but there is a lot of information sharing and work sharing, and our goal and having these webinars and more broadly as part of our mission is to make sure that you have the knowledge and ability to successfully execute and oversee these projects. As our critical local partners. So as far as this FTA recipient onboarding webinar series, like I said, it's a 6-part series. We're really going over 3 kind of main topic areas. One is just prerequisites. What does it take to become an FTA grant recipient or recipient of FTA funds, right? And those are the 2 webinars we had already done. We started with legal capacity and civil rights. And then the last one we did, which was last week, related to financial and technical capacity. So those are just prerequisites that you need to meet in order to demonstrate that you can receive FTA funds. We are going to be moving into systems access and grant making, and then ongoing reporting and compliance. Specifically, the project specific requirements that you all need to adhere to, including today's topic, planning processes and requirements, and tomorrow's topic, environmental processes and requirements. So again, this is really meant to be an introduction. I know folks, have different levels of familiarity with FTA, working with FTA. Many of you are coming to us because of census changes. You were formerly a subrecipient and now you're a recipient, or the census change, the urbanized area boundaries or population, and you're suddenly a different type of reporter. So we are trying to create a curriculum here that really does cater to a spectrum of experience and knowledge with FTA, and ultimately this is meant to be an introduction to onboard you as a new direct recipient. This is just a list of the webinars. Like I said, we've already done the first two. The planning one is today's webinar, and then tomorrow at the exact same time, 3 p.m. Eastern, we're going to be doing environmental processes and requirements. The federal requirements webinars are more specific to projects. Specifically, how do you set these projects up in order to comply with federal requirements or receive FTA funds. And we're going to close out the webinar series actually with systems access, which is more focused on the different software and systems that you all need in order to really communicate and request money from FTA. There's specific tools like online tools and software that we really use as part of that kind of transactional and communication and review and processing of the grants themselves. And so we'll give you a quick introduction next week to FACES, ECHO, NTD, TRAMs, what they are, what they're used for, probably show you a quick demo navigation-wise. I'm going to actually pass it off to Rena Matthews. She's going to kickstart us on this topic, again, planning processes and requirements. So Rena, if you want to hop on screen.
Thank you. Just having a problem starting my video, but let me just make sure. Can y'all see me okay?
Yep. Well, actually, wait, no, mine just went out. Sorry.
Okay.
Oh, see you. Yep.
Thank you. I'm so sorry about that. So let's just get started here. The FTA's Office of Planning will provide an overview of the transportation planning process and requirements that recipients must meet in order to receive FTA financial assistance. The presentation will provide a brief overview of the metropolitan, statewide, and non-metropolitan planning, and we will cover the components of the transportation planning requirements, and most importantly, what it means for you as a grant recipient. Why is transportation planning important? Simply put, it is in the national interest to promote safe and efficient transportation. So that means whether you're driving to work, walking to a store, or taking the bus to a baseball game, or even waiting for your Amazon package, your transportation system is there to meet your needs. Good transportation planning and policy will serve the mobility needs of people in freight, foster economic growth and development within states and urbanized areas, better connect housing and population and employment, and minimize transportation-related fuel consumption and air pollution. We encourage the involvement of the community, stakeholders, and all interested parties throughout the transportation planning process, from ideas for projects to construction and operations. All this is guided by the planning factors, which I'll go over in a couple of slides. The 3C planning process is designed to ensure that public and stakeholders are fully engaged in establishing shared goals and a vision for the community. Continuous revolves around the idea that the process occurs repeatedly for the long term. Comprehensive, that all modes are included, including transit, roads, bicyclists, and pedestrians. Cooperative, to ensure that all responsible parties are working together. This process is governed by statutory provisions for transportation planning found in 49 USC and 23 USC, and with planning regulations that dictate that the planning processes, again, shall be continuous, comprehensive, and cooperative. Along with the 3 C's, we want to make sure that the following factors are part of the transportation picture of your community. It's important to address these considerations during the implementation of projects, strategies, and services. So we want to support economic vitality, increase the safety and security of the transportation system, increase accessibility and mobility of all people and freight, protect and enhance the environment, enhance our system integration and connectivity, promote efficient system management, preserve our existing system, improve resilience, and then enhance travel and tourism. Projects large and small follow the transportation planning process. Now, this chart shows the process by which cooperative, performance-driven, long and short-range transportation improvement priorities are determined. Note that the loop of feedback from the public continues through every step of the transportation planning process. If you're interested in learning more about this process, I encourage you to visit our transportation capacity building website, which we jointly administer with Federal Highway. So who carries out these plans? In urbanized areas, the transportation planning process is conducted by the Metropolitan Planning Organization in cooperation with the state DOT and transit providers. In rural areas, transportation planning processes are carried out by the state in cooperation with local officials in non-metropolitan areas and transit providers. Both FTA and Federal Highway jointly oversee these required planning processes, and the provisions, the statutory provisions, are 49 USC, 23 USC, and then our joint planning regulations are provided in 23 CFR. We also have a really great course that you can take from the National Highway Institute called the Basics in Transportation Planning course, which will really help you kind of understand this a little bit better. I want to touch on one more thing that's important in developing plans, and that is a performance-based approach, which emphasizes a deliberate and thoughtful and structured approach and follows these steps. First, where do we want to go? We identify a broad vision that incorporates public input and sets overall goals. And how are we going to get there? We look at trends and targets to help compare alternate strategies based on data and information from past projects. And then what will it take? The programming steps help select specific investments to include in improvement plans, sometimes mid-range or 10-year plans. And then finally, how did we do? Evaluate how each option for a project meets its goal. These all stem from back to the beginning, the vision you help set for your community and your transportation needs. Again, if you want to learn more, we just updated the Model Long Range Transportation Plan book, which we jointly completed with Federal Highway, but you can also find some more information on the joint planning site that I mentioned earlier. I wanted to turn it over to Ava to really cover the transportation requirements and what it means for you. Ava.
Thank you, Rena, for that great overview of the transportation planning process. Now let's take a look at some of the planning work products that result from that process. Federal requirements call for agencies to deliver several key groups of documents as part of the transportation planning process. These consist of work programs, long-range plans, transportation improvement programs, and public engagement plans. This chart here gives you a quick snapshot of these various plans and who is responsible for producing them. Don't worry, though, about quickly jotting down all this information. At the end of my presentation, I will show you the resource as to where you can find this chart and other helpful information. But first, let's go through a little bit more detail of the plans relevant to the grant development process. First up is the primary document created by the MPO, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, which is often referred to as the MTP. The MTP is the official multimodal transportation plan for the MPO's planning area. The plan covers at least a 20-year time frame. This plan is developed, adopted, and updated through the transportation planning process that Rena described earlier. MTPs are updated every 4 years. The MTP development and description describes performance measures and targets while taking into consideration the planning factors. This long-range plan includes things such as operational and management strategies, identifies regional capital investments and transportation enhancements, and also has a fiscally constrained financial plan. Similar to the MTP discussed on the previous slide is what is known as the State Long-Range Transportation Plan, or the LRTP. As you might have guessed from the name, this plan is for the statewide area and not specific to one metropolitan area. Having many of the same components and aspects as the MTP, this plan is developed for the multimodal transportation system within the state and is a 20-year plan as well. Next, we have the Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program, known as the TIP. This is a priority list of proposed federally funded projects. The projects must be consistent with the current Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the MTP, and the project description in the TIP needs to contain sufficient enough detail to identify the project and/or the phases of the project. The TIP must be fiscally constrained in order to demonstrate how the program will be implemented. The TIP links investment priorities to the performance targets of the MTP. TIPs are developed every 4 years with regular amendments during that period. See your individual MPO for exact schedules as to the overall TIP and the amendment process. Each state DOT develops a statewide transportation improvement program known as the STIP that incorporates the MPO's TIPs directly or by reference without change, and then has statewide projects that are outside of MPO areas. Next is the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP. This is an annual or biannual statement of work identifying planning priorities and activities to be carried out within a metropolitan planning area that includes a description of the planning work and resulting products from that plan, who will perform the work, time frames for completing that work, the cost of the work, and also the source of funds for that study. To expend federal highway and FTA funds for planning activities, MPOs are required to develop UPWPs. And now the question you're probably asking yourself is, how does all of this relate back to the grant process itself? So grant requirements. Any activity that is to be funded through a grant needs to be in the current federally approved Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, for urban areas, or the Statewide Transportation Improvement Program, the STIP, in rural areas that are for capital or operating projects. If your activity for your grant happens to be a plan or a study, that would be something that would need to be programmed in the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP. And so for all of these activities and documents here, you would also need to include in TRAMS the approval date from Federal Highway and FTA of the applicable planning document. Sometimes this is done through what is called a 1-dot letter in some regions. Other regions might refer to it as different things. There's also electronic STIPs, so sometimes that approval date can vary as to how that's actually conveyed, but that is something that would need to be included in TRAMS. And so there's also some MPOs that fall into an additional category of designation. There are urbanized areas with a population of at least 200,000 or more are recognized as having greater complexity of transportation issues. And so these urban areas are known as transportation management areas, or TMAs. TMAs are responsible for additional planning products, such as the congestion management process, which provides for the effective management and operation of new and existing transportation facilities while addressing congestion management in the MPO planning area. TMAs are reviewed and certified by USDOT every 4 years to ensure compliance with federal regulations. And so those reviews are what are known as certification reviews. And FTA and Federal Highway conduct these jointly every 4 years. The two agencies certify that each MPO serving the TMA is carrying out the metropolitan planning process in adherence with federal statutes and regulations. FTA and Federal Highway jointly issue certification on behalf of the DOT Secretary in accordance with 49 USC 5303. If your agency is within a TMA, you may be asked to participate in the certification review. And then finally, as promised, here are some helpful links that you can find additional information on the items we have discussed today. I would especially like to call your attention to the last link here on the list, the briefing book. Here you will find the graphics and charts that we have showed you in these slides. And then thank you all for listening to us here today on the planning process. I'm now going to turn this presentation back over to Robert for the question and answer portion of our webinar.
Great, thank you so much, Rena and Ava. Great presentations. We did receive a few questions, so I'll just list them off, and Rena or Ava, if you want to chime in, feel free to. This one's pretty simple. Just like baseline requirement, does my project have to be in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan, or MTP?
Well, that's a good straightforward question. Well, as Ava had noted, we want to make sure that the projects are included in the TIP or the STIP or the UPWP. But ideally, because of the transportation planning process I described earlier, we want to make sure that it is considered or prioritized as a strategy in the long-range transportation plan. So like some very specific projects, like when we were talking earlier, maybe like system preservation project, or specific projects may not be called out but in the long range plan. But again, we want to consider that we've identified those strategies, and maybe some of the bigger projects, the capital projects, are definitely included as part of the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. But again, not a requirement. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this has to do with timing. So we just received funding. How soon does our project need to be in the TIP?
Great question that we often have here. So we would encourage you to reach out to your MPO immediately after receiving notice of that award there, of receiving funding, and to get that integrated into the TIP as soon as the next cycle comes around, so that amendment process. And that does vary, again, depending on MPO as to how quickly the amendment could occur, but you want to get that coordination going as soon as you know that you are anticipating funding.
And let's see, how does one, I guess, find out who my MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, is? How do you find that information out?
So really, in that case, the regional office is going to be your best resource. They will tell you whether or not you're part of an urban or a rural area, and so you need to be coordinating with the state DOT, or if you need to be coordinating with an MPO, and then who the best contact is at that entity that you need to be having that coordination with. So yeah, reach out to your planning director at your regional office, or maybe if you're working with a particular grant manager, they can put you in contact with the appropriate people there.
Perfect. Actually, that's a good segue. If you have any additional questions on these topics, please do reach out to your regional office. And then if you had any questions related to the webinar itself, we have this email address. Feel free to reach out to us. I don't see any other questions, so I'll just quickly, if you all could oblige me in answering two poll questions, the same two poll questions we've been doing for the last two webinars. Are pretty simple, so I'm going to launch them right now. Again, feedback is anonymous. They're really helpful for us to develop and refine this curriculum for future presentations. So first question, did today's presentations improve your understanding of these topics? And then the second question is, did today's presentation provide an adequate level of information and detail as an introduction to these topics? Leave it open for maybe like 20 more seconds. We did get a question. What is a briefing book?
Hi, I just put some information in the chat there about the briefing book. We did
Oh, perfect.
refer to it as a guide for transportation planning. So, and also has some reference material. So please take a look at it because a lot of our presentation today was based off that book. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks for being so quickly prepared with that link. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Hey, Robert. It's
Yeah.
Donald. Yeah, I'm going to put in the chat. Federal Highways actually has a portal where you can actually look up your MPO by state. So I'll put that in the chat. Let me see if it works. Yep.
Yeah, try that.
Okay.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you, Donald. And try that link again. People say it wasn't working. I wonder if it's working for me. Let me know if it's not, if it's working for you all now. Thank you. And again, the link that Donald shared is really great because that's where the link to the transportation capacity website is. So if you actually kind of play around with that website, you'll find a lot more resources. Thank you.
And to answer one of the questions, comments, or I guess requests really, we can send the link to the recordings. They're going to be on the new recipient page on FTA's webpage on our website. So we'll go ahead and send that. And I know we all owe you one follow-up question related to the financial management oversight training. So we will get you that as well. And that was a question posed last week. So that is it. I'm going to end this poll. I don't see any other open questions. So with that, thank you again, Rena, Ava, great presentations. Thank you all for attending and for your interest. And please feel free to reach out to your region staff, with any follow-up questions. And like I said, they could always put us in touch with folks in headquarters or folks in the other regions to help get you an answer. With that, I'll conclude the webinar presentation. Again, we do have one tomorrow. It's really complementary, environmental processes and requirements. We'll be talking about NEPA, other requirements as well. So if you can tune in for that one, that'd be great. It will also be posted. Just don't worry if you aren't able to make it. With that, thank you all for your time, and we hope you have a great day.